There is a large and important body of opinion opposed to fluoridation is held by the Anti-Fluoridation Campaign Committee, of which Mr. Jaffrey is chairman. And I now present to you Mr. Jaffrey, who will address you. Thank you.
I represent the Anti-Fluoridation Campaign of New South Wales, a body set up to combat fluoridation in this state. I have been asked to express my views on some of the objections to fluoridation. I say some of the objections because it would require several hours to place all of the available evidence before you. Our case is so strong that my task is relatively simple. I also want to clear up any misconceptions you may have about the anti-fluoridation movement and the type of campaign we are conducting. I have no intention of indulging in argument. This would be a sheer waste of effort. Tonight, I shall confine myself to solid scientific facts. I could quote hundreds of opinions of eminent people on this subject, and every one of them would be quite valid. But I believe that one fact is superior to 100 opinions. The theory of fluoridation is a complete fallacy. It is bad in theory and impossible in practice. I claim that the theory is a fallacy because dental caries is not caused by a lack of fluoride. And since dental caries is not caused by a lack of fluoride, it is futile to attempt to prevent or cure it by drinking diluted vat poison. The cause of dental caries is well known: wrong living, wrong food, and wrong living habits. Correct these and dental caries will disappear. But my concern is with the poison itself and its effect on humanity. My interest stems from the fact that I am a naturopath. I believe that our food should come from the soil in an organic form through plant life. The idea of eating second-hand food, processed food, or inorganic chemicals is untenable. I believe that all diseases can be prevented and cured without drugs, medicines, or operations. So, I am against fluoridation of water in principle and in practice. I am therefore opposed to all forms of mass medication, whether it be sodium fluoride, beer, milk, or even orange juice, which experts may propose to add to our water supply. Over the years, there have been many suggestions made to add substances such as calcium, iodine, copper, cobalt, magnesium, and other substances to our water supply. And now we have sodium fluoride. I take the view that it is not scientific to attempt to poison the public into good health. No amount of medication will correct a faulty way of life. Sodium fluoride, which is the combination usually added to water, is a poison. Our opponents say that because we call it a poison, we are crackpots, ignorant laymen, and amateur dabblers in health. Let us see. On our side, we have thousands of well-known scientists such as Professor Spira, Professor Stein, Dr. Exner, and others overseas, Professor Ames, Dr. Sutton of Melbourne, and last but by no means least, Professor Follier of Tasmania. When these scientific gentlemen speak on scientific matters, their opinions are highly respected. They are called authorities, and so they are. Yet, when they have the temerity to speak against fluoridation, overnight they become crackpots. Now, can we seriously believe this sudden metamorphosis? As for people like myself, alas, I have no university degree. All my studies have been homegrown, so to speak. So I am grouped along with the ignorant laymen quite beyond the pale. Well, back to the poison. The fact is, of course, that sodium fluoride is a poison. This is the definition given in the standard textbooks on chemistry, pharmacy, and toxicology. Sodium fluoride is a poison and is sold as such. due to the fact that when sodium fluoride enters the bloodstream, it forms a combination with calcium to form calcium fluoride. Calcium is an essential and major element of the bones and teeth. However, it is not the most important by any means. Calcium, without several other minerals, is too soft. Anyone handling a stick of chalk, almost pure calcium, knows this. Fluorine supplies the hardness. Several other minerals, such as manganese, magnesia, and silica, supply the elastic quality and balance the extreme hardness and brittleness of fluorine. We can thus see that as the fluorine is deposited in the bones and teeth, there is a danger of extreme brittleness. This is just what does happen. In some cities in the United States, where fluoridation has been used for some years, doctors have reported a high increase in the incidence of green stick fractures of bones and brittle teeth in older people. While the danger may not be so great for young people, the prospect for those over 20 years of age is decidedly grim. The first indication of the effects of fluoridation in any town or city are always a slight apparent reduction in the rate of dental caries. This is owing to the superficial coating on the enamel of the teeth. Statistics show quite clearly that the positive results that are obtained only defer caries for 2 or 3 years. For instance, sometimes after 6 years, the caries rate will drop dramatically, but by the 9th year, the caries rate is the same as before fluoridation. So, no permanent gain is made, only a deferment. After a few years of fluoridation, a disease known as fluorosis appears. This is detected by a characteristic mottling of the teeth. This is followed by brittleness and chalkiness. In short, for a slight temporary advantage, the public pays in the long run by considerable harm to the bone structure and disfigurement of the mouth. Have any of you been wondering why fluorides are added to water instead of fluorine? There is a very good reason. Fluoridators claim that it is a lack of fluorine which causes dental caries. Why then is fluorine not added to water? The element fluorine is naturally a gas. It is so powerfully destructive, so dangerous to handle, and so difficult to produce that it is not practical nor safe to do so. Chemists say that it is difficult to produce the material to make a vessel to hold it. Any other elements are either acted upon by it or destroyed by it. I am told that very few chemists have ever seen or handled fluorine for this very reason. Whenever we handle a poison, it is comforting to know that in an emergency we have an antidote for it. Sodium fluoride would not be quite so objectionable except for the fact that there is no known antidote. Fancy putting a chemical like this in our water supply. What would happen if by some mischance some people received an overdose? It is quite possible that someday the mixing machinery might just fail. Consumers of this water would be poisoned, but there is no antidote available. I believe that the risks involved are too great. Now here is another serious objection. When once added to water, it cannot be removed. Our opponents say that those crackpots who oppose fluoridation can buy a simple filter to be attached to a tap which will remove added fluoride. This is a lie, one calculated to deceive fair-minded people. I have had extensive inquiries made and no such device is available. The only way in which fluorine can be removed is by means of a cumbersome and costly apparatus quite out of the reach of any private individual. According to several standard textbooks on physiology, fluorine causes the blood to lose its ability to coagulate, that is, to clot. This means that in the early stages, there would be delayed healing of wounds. In the advanced stages, it could easily lead to hemophilia. The adding of sodium fluoride to our bloodstream causes the calcium fluoride to be formed from the calcium normally present in the bones and blood. Calcium fluoride is insoluble. It cannot be dissolved. This means that it would and does accumulate in the blood vessels and organs. United States, which have been fluoridated for some years, there is a steep rise in the incidence of Mongolism. For the benefit of my non-professional listeners, Mongolism is the birth of malformed idiots. The cause is an interference with the enzymes of the body, and fluorine is the most powerful enzyme inhibitor known. These are just a few of the facts which are known. There are many more which are not yet known. It is not scientific to assume that what we do not know is safe. It is always prudent to adopt the attitude that what we do not know may not be safe. Fluoridation is bad in theory. Does it work in practice? The self-appointed fluoridation experts tell us that the area around Sydney and most of New South Wales is deficient in fluoride. Near Sydney, in the area which is alleged to be deficient in fluorine, is an orphanage. The society which conducts this orphanage was convinced that general health and dental health depended on right living. They believed that ill health and dental decay were caused by wrong food and wrong living habits. So, over a period of 18 years, the orphans were given a natural diet and hygienic living conditions. Despite the fact that they drank water which was allegedly deficient in fluorine, their level of health was extraordinarily high. There had never been a case of serious illness, and the dental health was almost perfect. Now, I asked the fluoridators, what extra benefits could fluoridation have added to this result? Here is another case, which is the most devastating case against fluoridation with which I am familiar. Fluoridation promotion did not work out as expected in this case. Here is a case in which bias and emotion did not enter. In Mason City, in the state of Iowa, in the United States, the publicity in favour of fluoridation commenced. The newspapers crusaded for it, civic groups signed petitions, leading health authorities all gave their endorsements. Local doctors and dentists testified as to the terrible state of the children's teeth and pleaded for water fluoridation to save them. The decay rate was so great, so they said, that available dentists could not handle it without water fluoridation, and it would get out of hand. An employee of the local health department made appearances in public and showed charts and statistics to prove that by adding from 1 to 1.5 parts per million of sodium fluoride to the drinking water, decay in children's teeth could be cut by 65%. Then somebody thought of checking the natural fluorides in Mason City water. An analyst found that it contains 1.24 parts per million, exactly the amount of fluorine that the fluoridators insisted would cut decay. All this occurred after residents had been assured of how terrible their children's teeth were as a result of drinking Mason City water. It is no wonder that the city fathers of Mason City refused to fluoridate their water supply. There was no anti-fluoridation campaign to express its views in this case. The result was a natural outcome of scientific investigation. Our opponents accuse us of emotionalism. Just recently, when a referendum was held in Albury, the people voted against fluoridation by 4.5 to 1. So the Sydney Morning Herald came out with a leader, "Emotion wins at Albury." Well, they accuse us of emotionalism. I plead guilty. However, only those who value their health, understand it, and are prepared to do something about it have any true feelings on the subject. Those who are too indolent to make an effort to achieve and maintain health cannot appreciate the feelings of those who do. Here is another piece of evidence in our favour. I refer now to the Australian Aborigines. Anthropologists tell us that these people, living in their natural state, have excellent teeth. Yet the Australian Aborigines have been drinking water allegedly deficient in fluorine for centuries. The inhabitants of the island of Tristan da Cunha had excellent teeth and good health until recently. They had lived for centuries on the crude, wholesome foods growing on their little island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. In recent years, they have increased enormously their consumption of white sugar, white flour, jams and sweets. Then, deterioration in just a few samples of what we can expect. Even if fluoridation was valid in theory, it is quite impossible in practice. It is not possible to control the dosage. Some people drink no water at all. Others drink moderately. Still others drink large quantities. At some schools, it is found that some children drink as much as 8 times the quantities of others. The first group will get no fluoride at all. The third group must get an overdose. So you can see that even the distribution is a problem. Now here is something which the fluoridators do not want you to know. The question is, are all doctors, all dentists, all scientists, and all health authorities in favour of fluoridation? On a recent television session, a panel member was asked if there were any members of the dental and medical professions publicly opposing fluoridation. He grudgingly admitted that there were only a few, and implied they didn't amount to much. Now this is typical of the propaganda being indulged in today. The fact is that although large groups such as the various medical and dental associations have made public pronouncements in favour of fluoridation, thousands of their members disagree. Some of these have voluntarily formed themselves into groups in order to have their views brought under the notice of the public and the authorities. In England, we have several committees with hundreds of members. In the United States, we have several groups. One, the Medico-Dental Ad Hoc Committee, is composed entirely of dentists and doctors, and it has over 1,500 members. In fact, there are more doctors, dentists and scientists against fluoridation than for it. Now I propose to answer an objection which is always raised. It goes something like this. How do you explain the positive results gained by cities overseas where fluoridation is said to have produced dramatic decreases in dental caries of up to 70%? I shall answer that objection quite definitely. I don't have to explain it, but I can answer it. The claims are a tissue of lies and misstatements. Dr. Fred Exner once engaged in debate the man who was called the father of fluoridation, H. Trendley Dean. Dr. Exner got Dean in a corner and forced him to admit that his statistics were doctored and worthless. In Australia, we have a scientist, Dr. P.R.N. Sutton of Melbourne University. He has analysed the classic trials which took place at Grand Rapids, Newborough and other cities. His book is a complete denial and condemnation of the whole farce. He proves conclusively that the trials were improperly conducted, that the results were contrary to the published findings, and in some cases the figures have been deliberately faked in order to make them agree with the wishes of the fluoridators. The fluoridators have been so dishonest that they have not even taken the usual precautions and have disregarded the most elementary evidence. They have therefore exposed themselves to the charges that they are scientific humbugs. In one experimental trial, the city was divided into groups. 1,000 examinations were made in one group, 400 in another, 40 in another, and in one group, only one person was examined. Now it is quite obvious that if this one person was free from dental caries, the rate of freedom from dental caries was 100%, and that is how it appears in the statistics. Another test city, which had been fluoridated, had 11 dentists. The local council engaged 22 extra dentists to give treatment and lectures on oral hygiene in the schools. The appearance